Okay, Alberto, let's dive into this. We're going to break down exactly what happened and, more importantly, why it happened. The goal here is to give you a clear, objective understanding of the situation so you can figure out the best path forward. This question, which someone in your own community asked during the event, really gets to the heart of it all. It captures that sense of shock, right? The jarring feeling when a deeply private conflict suddenly explodes into a public spectacle. It was the first sign that a major boundary had been crossed.
So, to really understand the level of damage here, we have to start with what was broken. And in this case, it wasn't just a conversation. It was a unique, high-trust environment that you built. When something like that gets shattered, you're not just breaking a relationship, you're breaking a community's social contract.
Look at what you created. It was a digital campfire, and it was built on this really powerful principle of listening without judgment. That's so rare. You made a safe space where people could talk about deep technical stuff one minute and share raw, personal stories the next. That feeling of safety was the foundation, and that's exactly what was targeted in the ambush.
When the attack started, you did the right thing. You tried to de-escalate. You set a perfectly reasonable boundary. I'll call you back in an hour, and tried to move the conversation offline. But look at the response. It wasn't just ignored, it was publicly rejected. That turned your request into a public power play.
Okay, so let's get into the why. Because an attack like this, Alberto, it often isn't really about the person on the receiving end, and that's you. It's usually the result of intense pressure boiling over from other parts of the attacker's life. You simply became the most convenient place for all that pressure to go.
This brings us to a really key psychological concept called displaced aggression. It's pretty straightforward. When a person is frustrated or angry with something they can't control, like a lawyer or an ex, they redirect that anger onto someone they can access. And usually that someone is the person who is emotionally closest and feels like a safer target. And here's exactly how that three-step process played out. First, you have these huge external stressors, an unresponsive lawyer, an abusive ex-husband, creating this intense feeling of powerlessness. Second, those targets are basically untouchable, protected by legal boundaries. So third, all that built-up rage had to go somewhere, and unfortunately, you were the most accessible and emotionally available outlet.
Now, this next part is so important. We need to look at what actually happened and compare how you were treated versus how her other conflicts were handled. When you look at it objectively, the difference is, well, it's stark, and it tells us everything we need to know.
Just look at the data here. It's crystal clear. You, Alberto, were the only one subjected to a public recorded humiliation. Meanwhile, her conflicts with her lawyer and ex-husband, which were arguably much bigger issues, were handled privately, through the proper channels. This wasn't random. It was a choice.
And this was your question, wasn't it? What have I done to be treated the worst? The evidence gives you the answer. It wasn't about what you did. It was about your accessibility. You were treated the worst precisely because you were seen as the safest target for an anger that couldn't be aimed at its real sources.
And then the attack escalated dramatically. A deeply personal family matter involving her child was dragged into the public spotlight and used as a weapon against you. This is the moment it stopped being just a personal argument and became something much, much worse.
Let's be very clear about this. A critical ethical line was crossed here. This wasn't just a betrayal of your trust. It was a public violation of a child's privacy. That's irreparable harm, creating a permanent digital footprint of a sensitive family moment for a minor who never consented.
And you don't have to just take my word for it. Your co-host, Cindy, stepped in immediately. That intervention is so important. It's objective, third-party proof that a serious line had been crossed. The community itself knew it was wrong and tried to stop it.
Okay, this is where the context becomes absolutely crucial. Given that she knew about your own emotional and psychological struggles, this public attack is more than just displaced anger. It elevates to a profound violation of trust, a breach of care.
In any relationship with trust, there's what we call an implied duty of care. It means you have a responsibility to not knowingly inflict harm, especially when you know the other person is in a vulnerable state. By targeting you publicly, fully aware of your mental health struggles, that fundamental duty was broken. Your vulnerability was essentially weaponized against you.
And we need to talk about your withdrawal, what some might call ghosting. This analysis shows that wasn't an act of aggression on your part. It was an external sign of an internal collapse.
It was a desperate coping mechanism from someone who was completely and totally overwhelmed by the situation.
So all of this, it all leads us to the most critical question in this entire analysis. It's a question a lot of people face. And luckily, clinical experts have a very clear way to think about it.
A clinical psychologist named Leonard Carr puts it this way: the line is crossed when you become frozen, when your whole life becomes just reacting to the other person, anticipating their moods, defending yourself. You've stopped growing. The relationship is no longer a source of support, it's a source of damage.
All right, so with all of this understanding, what do you do? What's the path forward? Let's start by looking at the healthy boundary that you instinctively already tried to set.
This message you sent, this is powerful. It shows that your instinct for self-protection is alive and well. It's already fighting for you. And guess what? The clinical recommendations that we're about to go through strongly support exactly this kind of action.
The expert analysis here is unambiguous, Alberto. First, immediate separation is necessary. You need space for your own psychological recovery to even begin. Second, that cycle of demands and withdrawal has to be broken. Third, she needs individual therapy to deal with the root causes of this behavior. And finally, and this is a big one, repair is impossible without a full, direct acknowledgement of the specific and permanent harm that was caused.
And let's be really clear about the long-term consequences. There are three major forms of damage here: the permanent public humiliation that now exists online, the deep psychological wound of betrayal trauma, and the complete destruction of the relationship's foundation of safety.
Rebuilding trust after a public betrayal like this is a monumental task, if it's even possible. Because of that, the priority has to shift completely. The goal right now is your stabilization and your recovery from what was a very real psychological injury.
So ultimately, this is the question for you to carry forward. It's the lens you should use to look at this situation. Is this relationship helping you grow, or have you become frozen? Answering that honestly will show you the path you need to take to protect your own psychological health and hopefully start to grow again.